underground if directed to do so. And we feel at the end of the day it's going to require a political solution.
All right, Pádraig, listen, we'll leave it there for the moment. Thanks for joining us here as always, though. Pádraig O'Reilly, spokesperson for the NEPPC, the North East Pile and Pressure Campaign.
OK, Michael, I had another call this morning. A gentleman was in touch and he wanted to make the point about, he said, does any politician or anyone ever come on your programme, or any political programme for that matter, where they're talking about some kind of tax, another tax? He says we've fat tax, sugar tax, tax on plastic bags, tax on drink, tax on cigarettes. Where is it all going? They seem to just tax everything, says this listener. Had a couple of points, and it was John from Lucan. He doesn't think the Fianna Fáil should go into a coalition with Fine Gael. He says that the founders of the party would be turning in their grave. That's the Fianna Fáil party. And also he was listening into your discussion with Father Sean Healy, and agrees that everyone should get out and vote, and he urges people to get out and vote, that we need that people get out of bed and do it. That's what he says. And he wonders, just as an aside, he thinks that there's people who have never voted in their life, and he wonders, are they afraid to vote maybe because they don't know what's involved? And that's just a thought from him. And quickly, Charlie from Navan echoed the same sentiment, and he says that sometimes people are very lackadaisical about voting, and they should make their voice heard and not be complaining afterwards.
Yeah, I have a terrible suspicion that there'll be a low turnout next week. Hopefully I'm completely wrong, and that everybody will exercise their democratic mandate and go out and make their views known through the polling booths. We'll leave it there for the moment. Thank you indeed, Marie. You are going to come back to us, as has been the case the last few days, again at the end of the programme today, following our roundtable debate. I should have mentioned that we're going to be talking with Peadar, Tóibin, Shane Cassells, Dominic, Hannigan and John Malone earlier in the programme, but we'll be joined by them in the studio for a roundtable pre-election debate in a few minutes' time. And if you want to make comment on what the candidates have to say, or something else that you've been hearing this morning, or if there's an issue that you want to raise with us yourself, you're welcome to ring Marie or Maggie now on 1850 715 958. That's 1850 715 958, or text 53958 and text cost 20 cents.
Michael Reid on LMFM is heard live from 9 a.m. weekdays, and this is a repeat broadcast of the programme. But you can make comment right now on our 24-hour comment line. Call us now or anytime on 1850 365 958. That's 1850 365 958. And the lines are open now.
Michael at lmfm.ie. Michael Reid on LMFM.
Time now for our pre-election roundtable debate. We're with candidates from the two constituencies in County Meath, as it turns out, this morning. Joining us in studio is sitting TD for Sinn Féin in Meath West, Peadar Tóibin. Fianna Fáil councillor in Meath West, Shane Cassells. The Labour Party candidate in Meath West wasn't available to us, so we've asked the candidate in Meath East to substitute, and that's sitting TD, Dominic Hannigan. And John Malone is an independent candidate in Meath West. And you're very welcome to the programme. Thanks indeed for joining us here on the programme. I suppose there is one issue that is common to all of you, which we were talking about before the break there with Pádraig O'Reilly of the North East Pile and Pressure Campaign Group, and that is this air grid proposal for the North-South Interconnector. There will be an oral hearing, as we heard this morning, which will take place on the 7th of March, and the group saying that they're disappointed in how the government has represented the people of County Meath in respect of this proposal on the programme this morning. Dominic Hannigan, how do you respond to that?
It's a big issue for many people living across Meath. These pylons, if built, would lead to a lot of visual intrusion in their areas. It could lead to a reduction in the amount of tourists going there, and of course a potential reduction in property prices as well. So it's something that there is a lot of concern about. I've objected to them. I've asked to be allowed to speak at the oral hearing. That request has been granted, so I'll be speaking at the oral hearing, saying why I believe that where possible they should be put underground, and that'll happen next month.
And does that mean that you'll go to a public meeting held by a state body and speak against government policy?
A public, well, in effect, and Bord and Orla will be holding a hearing that is open to the members of the public, so I think that's what you mean. And yes, I'll be giving my personal opinion that I believe that where possible we should be putting these underground. I think the impact on people's lives, people's houses, people's properties, and on the general community is too great. So yes, I do believe that we should be putting them underground where possible.
Okay, and how strongly do you feel that way? Because it's one thing saying it as a public meeting, it's another thing supporting the decision makers, in other words the government which you are part of.
Of course, and I've been part of the government for the last 5 years. And I've always found that where possible, if you want to get things done, you do it from inside the party. I think the idea of breaking the whip and leaving the party achieves very little. It just means that you're on the sidelines hurling from the ditch. I've always found that the way to achieve things is by working inside the party. For instance, on something like social housing, through working with the minister, we've been able to get a further 15 units. The county council will now be able to purchase 15 units over the next 3 months.
Just stay with Pylons for a moment, because the point Pádraig O'Reilly made on the programme this morning was that EirGrid have said that if they're directed to underground, they will underground. So it's a decision that can be made by the people you're representing this morning.
And indeed, myself and the other TDs for Meath, the Fine Gael TDs for Meath, and including Peadar as well, have been trying to get the government to do this. But the way to do that, I believe, is by staying within the party.
By making a stand.
And working with the government ministers to try to get them to
all of the candidates are very anxious to come in here. I want to just go to the independent candidate first of all. John Malone, do you have any thoughts on this particular issue?
Good morning, Michael Reid, and good morning, candidates, and good luck to your efforts in this election. John Malone is an independent candidate. I just mentioned before I say anything about pylons that I'm a pro-life candidate and a slogan, faith in jobs always.
Okay, and we'll talk about pro-life issues and repealing the 8th Amendment in a few moments' time. But do you have any thoughts on the pylons?
I do indeed.
Yeah? Tell us what they are.
The cost factor has been mentioned that underground is a more expensive proposition. I'd venture to say that pylons, by the size of them and the fact that I venture to say they're all imported products, that going underground could in fact be a cheaper option rather than the expensive option that the so-called experts seem to say. For example, the experts say that the St James's Hospital is a good site for a children's hospital, where the people that know says Blanchardstown. So that's an example of experts not being in tune with the requirements.
Experts differ, fair enough. Shane Cassells, this was originally Fianna Fáil policy, wasn't it?
No, first of all, good morning, Michael. Can I start off with the point that Dominic made, where he said that they would argue at the Umbor Penala hearing for undergrounding.
No,
that was dispelled last night.
Start off with Fianna Fáil policy if you wouldn't mind, because the question I put to you.
I was looking at it again on this point first of all.
I know, but I'm chairing the debate, and the question I put to you was, this is as a result of Fianna Fáil policy. This goes back 8 years when Fianna Fáil were in government. Mm-hmm.
And at that time, they were making the point that it was 25 times more expensive to underground.
And the campaigners were saying nonsense.
And it has been proven that is not the case. And Fianna Fáil, over the last number of years... So
Fianna Fáil was wrong?
Fianna Fáil, over the last number of years, has been one of the strongest proponents in looking for the undergrounding of the pylons. Michael Moynihan, our spokesperson on energy, was the first person, Michael, to actually get EirGrid to admit in these Oireachtas hearings that undergrounding was an option. That was the first time anyone got them to admit that. And on the point that was made that at the Umbor Penala hearing it could be argued for undergrounding, that's a total misnomer, because the point was made by Pádraig O'Reilly chairing the meeting last night very clearly that the hearing is not a hearing on undergrounding or overgrounding. It's a hearing on an application for the pylons, and they will either rule to accept them or reject them. So this notion that you can go in and argue for undergrounding at the Umbor Penala hearing is a fallacy, because it's not on the table.
If you change the jerseys, does that mean a change of heart?
No, hang on a second, Michael. This is very clear. We have been making the point very clearly that following the new information that has been brought forward, specifically since 2011, that has shown that this undergrounding option is clearly affordable, and they have reduced the cost from 25 times to 1.5 times, that it is an option, and that we were the first party to get EirGrid to admit that it could be done, because they were making the point to government it couldn't be done, and we were able to get EirGrid to admit that it could be done, and it's also, with the new technology, an affordable solution as well. But this notion that government TDs are kicking this to an Umbor Penala hearing is a misnomer, because that's not where this is going to get decided. And they made the point last night, the NEPPC group, that they are still looking for the government to withdraw the application.
Okay.
So the TDs that will be elected from the constituencies are looking to withdraw the application.
Peadar, Tóibin, you've made all sorts of promises going into this general election that as a party you'll build so many social houses and different things. You're going to fix the health service and not. If you were to underground sections of this, or all of this as the case may be, would you build fewer social houses, for example?
First of all, I asked the minister, the Labour minister, Alex White, how much would it cost to underground it, and also how much would be the extra charge on each unit of electricity in the state, and he returned the answer to me that he didn't know. And the fact of the matter, the government doesn't.
But EirGrid are suggesting that it would be more expensive.
They're saying that's about 1.5% of 1.5 times the actual cost of it. Now,
and the cost. Just remind us what the cost is. This is running into millions, isn't it?
It's running
tens of millions.
It's running into hundreds of millions of euros now.
Right.
Even EirGrid admits every year that it's postponed. There's a €30 million cost to it. So, in other words, over 7 years delayed, which we're seeing now, we're seeing €210 million of cost that has been foolishly wasted due to this government's pig-headed attitude to force this overhead. And they would have saved that money. Now, just let me say, just last night, it was amazing to hear the government TDs speaking out of both sides of their mouth. Literally what they were saying is that EirGrid is some kind of independent fiefdom, and that they were passengers in this whole process. These government TDs are elected directly from the people of Meath to represent them. This idea that they can do so and sits in a government party which is imposing infrastructure on people.
You said the same thing about the wind farm, but the Emlyn proposal was rejected and the government TDs were vindicated.
No, first of all, we welcome the fact that was rejected, but we were just asking for the government to produce guidelines with regards to the distance that they should be from people's houses. And those guidelines were initiated in 2013. And Michael, where are they now?
Well, let's go back to Dominic Hannigan, because
hasn't even published those guidelines
the
yet.
conversation we're having is one whereby, if you were listening, you'd assume that this decision has already been made.
Well, it hasn't, and anybody involved in the planning process, and I have been, knows that these are independent inquiries. I believe that they'll be independent, and they can quite easily look at the evidence on the table and reject them.
Does the Labour Party not make the decision?
The spokesperson for the campaign group was saying here on the programme this morning he expected that it would be given approval. What's your expectation?
I don't know. I saw with EMLA, and I was on talking to you about EMLA, I thought that there was sufficient reasons for the inspector to throw that out, and on that occasion he did. So I believe that the same thing can happen here. But I'm just listening to both of my colleagues here today. Firstly, if Sinn Féin was serious about this, they could stop this tomorrow, because they run the government up in the north of Ireland. Their coalition there. This proposal is to provide electricity to the north of Ireland. If they were really against wind farms, if you were against wind farms, if you were against pylons, you could stop this tomorrow.
Okay,
but before Shane
welcome back to you. There's three against one here.
Shane flip-flopped in this. 5 years ago when he was in government, he was all for the
government, and this kind of flip-flop. You're trying to throw mud now. You weren't even at the meeting last night, and now you're trying to run. Your own constituency colleague Tracy McElhenney isn't even here today. You are running for the hills. You weren't there last night. I'll give the blue shirts something. They came to the meeting last night. They came to the meeting and took the flak.
Okay, I've taken the faders down so that, because we can't hear anybody and there's people trying to listen to the radio. So please, if you don't mind, we have plenty of time to discuss it, and we'll give everybody time to have their say. So you're saying that there was a flip-flop.
Yeah, all of a sudden it's year zero for Fianna Fáil. We won't forget what you did to this country 5 years ago, Shane, you and your party. We won't forget the mess you left us in. And don't pretend that everything started in March 2011. It didn't.
Dominic, you've had a pop at the two other parties here, so Sinn Féin first.
If you had been there yesterday, Dominic, you would have heard NEPP and their view with regard to Sinn Féin's role in this and how positive it has been. And in the north, it's only like 60 miles away, or 50 miles away. You should know how the government system works there. Ministers have autonomy there because of the D'Hondt system. And after there's a planning process, an individual minister can then say yay or nay to a proposal. And the minister in that case is actually the SDLP, which is a sister party of your own. And once it goes past the particular minister, it then goes to the executive. We have clearly said that our Ordash motions mandate every Sinn Féin elected rep to make sure it doesn't happen at that point.
So when Darren O'Rourke was on the radio talking about going up to meet Mark Durkan and making the case and all that, what was that? Was that just publicity stunt, or was there any reason for telling us about it? Like, was there any purpose to it all?
Michael, education is a fantastic and really important issue, and sometimes ministers in the six counties don't understand the depth of feeling that people have with regards to particular infrastructural projects. And Darren O'Rourke was simply putting the case to the Mark Durkan that there's a massive fear in our area
that
with
he
regards
and the
to
Sinn
this.
Féin delegation wasted their time, was it?
Not at all, because people can be... Darren O'Rourke is an extremely persuasive individual, and Darren O'Rourke has done massive work on this.
Mark Durkan and the Northern Ireland government are opposed to this proposal, are they?
No, Mark Durkan hasn't given...
it sounds like a waste of time.
Mark Durkan hasn't given his view on it. Right now, let's be clear about this. There's a planning process there. After that planning process, Mark Durkan has the power to say yes or no to it.
Okay.
And at that stage, it goes to the executive. And at that stage, Sinn Féin representatives are mandated to oppose it. Yeah. Now, all I'm saying is, we hear from the government's TDs to say that this is some kind of air grid decision. It's not. It's a minister's decision.
Right.
And there's a Labour minister, Pat Rabbitte, and Alex White, which are allowed these to process. And all they have to do is withdraw it.
Let's go back to Fianna Fáil, year zero.
Yeah, well, it's you know, I suppose any Labour representative has some neck coming back in here 5 years after we were here in these debates and accusing people of flip-flops, considering the flip-flops they made
from the country around, Shane,
from the famous Tesco ad and child benefit cuts and cuts to the elderly and college registration fees and doubling them and signing them. But I suppose, you know, after 5 years in the week of an election, the dog has finally found its bark. But you know, Michael, we saw last night, as Peadar said, if Dominic had come to the meeting and actually faced the people, what they were demanding was that people would commit to the government actually withdrawing the application. This has happened once before, where they were directed to withdraw the application. That can still happen, so that it's actually not put before An Bord Pleanála, and that the Fianna Fáil proposal that was voted down in the Dáil, that it is actually goes to an independent review, like the Taoiseach was able to do for the one in the West.
Okay.
And this is what people are looking for. It's just fairness and equality. How can we have a situation where the one in the West can be actually reviewed for undergrounding option, but the one in the East can't?
Let me go to John Malone about can you look a little bit disconcerted, if you don't mind me saying so. There's an awful lot of shouting and bickering going on here this morning, isn't there?
Which is a pity, because when you're rowing a boat, you want to row together in the one direction, otherwise you're around in circles, and that's what this discussion reminds me of, going around in circles, pulled together. Now, can I say something other than about pylons, or do we have to keep
Well, I was going to ask you about your pro-life views, because the Labour Party yesterday launched their policy position. They made a point of a position that they've taken now for some time, which is that they want to hold a referendum within 6 months of the next government being formed to repeal the 8th Amendment. They want to repeal the 8th Amendment, which would make abortion more widely available. That's the Labour Party position. It's one which Sinn Féin agrees with, and Fianna Fáil doesn't disagree with, but you do.
I do, most emphatically. The discussion so far with the political parties is all one-sided. We saw the lack of a debate with the same-sex marriage referendum. There was no debate, hence there was no, which is the duty of an opposition at all, to oppose such a far-reaching amendment to the Constitution. So if you don't have a debate, people find it very difficult to make up their mind. Now, with regard to the pro-life issue, there has already been a referendum, and people have decided to protect the innocent. The support of the political parties and the media, particularly the state broadcaster, RTE, has been in support of changing the verdict that people have already reached. The constant talk about Amendment 8, as if we were all knew what it was all about, and we don't. People don't know what it's about. What it appears to be, abortion by the back door. The same sort of approach that the political parties did in the marriage referendum will be the same procedure that they'll adopt if they get the chance to have this so-called referendum, which we've already had.
Okay, I just interrupt for a second, John, because we're going to come to the other three candidates now. But when we do, we'll hear one candidate, the Labour Party candidate, who will disagree with you fundamentally and will ask people to vote to repeal the 8th Amendment, which gives that equal right to life to mother and child, unborn child. We'll hear from another candidate, the Sinn Féin candidate, whose party will ask people to do the same thing, but he'll oppose. And we'll hear from another candidate, I'm not sure how he feels personally about it, but he'll be allowed to vote whichever way he wants. That's the Fianna Fáil candidate. What do you think of the different positions?
Well, it's not clear cut. There are candidates like myself, independent, that's not subject to a party whip. They may have their own individual opinions, and I'm sure they have. But when they're in parties, they have to obey the party whip, which is a pity. Because
well, in the case of Fianna Fáil, they'll have freedom of conscience. They can vote
that's great. A pity they didn't have it for the same-sex referendum. This is one of the reasons that John Malone started the Christian and Jobs Action Party. We have a website for such, but because we haven't enough members, the 300 required to register as a political party, I am standing as an independent with the views of that particular party.
On this platform. So let's take up on that point about the party whip, because this really applies, I think, to Peadar Tóibin, who's at odds with his party, Sinn Féin.
Yep. First of all, it's very important to state Sinn Féin policy in this. Sinn Féin are of the view that in certain circumstances, limited circumstances, there should be cases for access to abortion in this state. It's obviously clear from the experience of the last 5 years that I disagree with the party on this. My own view is I support the human rights of the mother and the child in all circumstances. I want a health service that actually saves the lives of mothers and children in our society. And you know, sometimes it interests me sometimes that while this is an issue of great debate and very difficult, sometimes it's the issues of perinatal services that surround mothers with children with life-limiting conditions are forgotten about. And I've spoken to a number of mothers who have had children in this circumstance, and some of those children survived birth, and indeed one of the children is actually 8 years of age.
And some of them live for decades, from seconds to decades.
So in other words,
generally speaking, the majority of these children will live.
Absolutely, there's no doubt in the majority of cases.
But this is the point that John was making. The other point he was making was that you have an option ultimately to follow the party whip or not. Now, you've been arguing that won't be the case, that you're going to somehow convince your party of the error of their ways.
No, you've asked. We've had interesting debates on this before, Michael, and you've asked me to look into the crystal ball and see exactly what the process will be, and in that process will it come to a binary question for myself. And all I've said to you yourself is my instincts are I'm Sinn Féin to the core. I've been in the party since 1997. I strongly believe that Sinn Féin is offering the best solution, north and south, to Ireland's ailments, and I believe that I will vote with the party in future, because I don't know exactly what mechanism is actually going to happen to bring this possibly to a referendum or not.
You believe you will vote with the party, but that you will not vote to repeal the 8th Amendment.
It is my first of all, as I said, I will. My instincts are to support legislation that protects the life of the mother and the child.
Be clear, please.
I endeavour to support my party in every case.
But you will vote against them if the party moves to repeal the 8th.
Well, see, that's a referendum, Michael. So it's not actually going to be
it requires legislation first.
It does require legislation, but the legislation will be to empower whether there'll be a referendum or not. It won't. The legislation.
Will you support that legislation?
I'll have to look at the legislation to see before I make a decision on that.
The question will be very simple. Do we put the question? Do we allow the people to vote this? Yes or no?
Well,
that's the question that the Dáil is going to be faced with asking. That's what you're going to be asked to vote on. Will you allow the people to have a choice on this matter?
Well, my own view on this is that it is necessary for a TD who supports the human rights of a mother and a child to make sure that in legislation, in the Dáil, every effort is made to protect those two rights.
You're not going to answer the question.
Well, I'll answer the question when the piece of legislation is in front of me.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You're not going to answer the question
until the legislation is in front of me.
Okay. Shane Cassells.
Thank you, Michael. As you've said and as John has acknowledged, there is no party whip on Fianna Fáil members in respect to this issue.
No leadership.
I will not be supporting any repeal of the 8th. I think it's actually been one of the most dominant topics as well on the doorsteps, and people asking candidates quite clearly where they stand.
Yeah, but isn't Fianna Fáil, like Fine Gael, talking out of both sides of its mouth, trying to please everybody on a situation that is clearly black and white?
No, and I think you'll find that within Fianna Fáil, and I was asked this question actually at a press conference last Friday when we were launching our childcare policy by journalists there. So I've stated this position on RT cameras and for the print media that the majority of Fianna Fáil members are against the repeal of the 8th, would not be campaigning for the repeal of the 8th, and it is not something that we'll be promoting.
Will you vote in favour of holding a referendum?
No, I don't think that as a society that it would be a positive move for us as a society to go down that road. So no, I wouldn't even support the holding of a referendum either.
That you won't allow people to have their say?
No, I don't think as a society that's where we should be going. I really firmly believe that.
Dominic Hannigan, why do you believe he's wrong?
Well, I have to agree with Shane on one thing. This is actually something that is coming up on the doorsteps. People from both sides of the discussion want to know how the candidates feel about this, and rightly so. I think we all know how sensitive an issue this is. This has been an issue that we've discussed for many decades now. I believe we do need to do it very respectfully of each other's points of view. I'm disappointed, by the way, Michael, that is 5 men talking about this issue here today, because
I was talking to a woman about this recently, and some others, and the woman took issue with the fact that I said that as a Labour Party candidate that a vote for Mary Moran was a vote for abortion. There's obviously disagreement within your own party, because she has said quite the opposite is true.
Well, our view is this, and we launched our campaign yesterday in relation to the 8th. We'll be putting the question to the people. We believe...
and campaigning for repealing the amendment.
Yes, we will be. And we believe that the women of Ireland are intelligent and sensible enough to make up their minds about how they run their lives, and we'll be giving them the option to repeal the 8th as soon as we can.
Let's take this to another level, right? Because Ivana Bakic told the press yesterday that what you're proposing is similar to what was introduced in the UK in 1967. Today in the UK you have abortion on demand. So is the Labour Party proposing abortion on demand?
Absolutely not. What we're asking for is a repeal of the 8th. The legislation that's put in place in the next Dáil will be down to the governments of the day, down to their agreement, down to the programme for government. And I know from the repeal of the X case legislation that we had 3 years ago now, how
is abortion available on demand in the UK? Is abortion available on demand in the UK?
There are term limits. There are term limits in place so that people have to go through certain procedures before they can go down there. What I'd like to see is better maternal health.
Is abortion available on demand?
I'd like to see education
in the event
so
of
we don't see
is abortion available in the UK in the circumstance of an unwanted pregnancy?
The legislation in the UK exists to allow people to have abortion within certain time limits if the potential mother decides that she wants to do that. But we're not proposing that here, Michael. We're proposing that we will repeal the 8th, which will then allow...
You're proposing legislation similar to what was introduced in the UK in 1967. Now, the reality of the situation in the UK is that in less than 24 weeks gestation, you can go to an abortion clinic and have an abortion regardless of the circumstances. Isn't that correct?
I don't know the details of the UK legislation. I have to tell you,
how many thousands of women travel to the UK every year, Dominic? You're not a child.
I don't know the details of the UK legislation.
Please.
But what I will say is this. Any legislation that would be brought in here has to be by the agreement of the then government parties. We saw from the X case legislation how detailed the discussion was in advance of that, and I could imagine...
But not a bit of that legislation changed, right? Through all that discussion, it didn't change, and that's an interesting point. That legislation didn't change.
I want to give some time to John Malone.
Yes, okay, but I think what we can expect to see is a detailed discussion about any
well, let's hear what John Malone has to say.
The party candidates here could talk for a wet week, a wet month on this issue, and you wouldn't know where you stood. It's a very simple, straightforward one. There was already a referendum for to protect the lives of the innocent. The murder of the innocent that takes place in the UK should be called what it is. That's what it is. Likewise, in the USA and wherever this abortion is there, it's crying out to heaven for revenge. And quite frankly, the sort of waffle that I hear and the dodging is absolutely deplorable. You're either for pro-life or you're not. Simple as that.
Shane Cassells, do you agree with that?
Well, I think
because you said you're pro-life.
I also said I wouldn't be supporting the repeal of the 8th or a referendum either. So John is sitting here beside me, and I think that was pretty clear what I said. I couldn't be any clearer. And in respect of people talking to both sides of the mouth, and Dominic speaking there, I mean the Labour Party are supporting groups as well. Which, if you go online and you see the groups that are calling for the repeal of the 8th, they want abortion on demand as well. They're not looking for a halfway house. they are speaking that they want abortion on demand. They want full abortion available in the country. And so whilst that's fine to say you'd wait for the legislation, you have to look beyond that in terms of the groups that are being supported by the Labour Party and where they're looking. And in respect to Sinn Féin, we have the Sinn Féin representative here this morning. I know his own personal position and I respect that, but the Sinn Féin and their party leader have been very clear in their support for the repeal. So you can't have a Lanigan's Ball situation where you step out and step in again. I think it is only right and proper, given the fact that we've all agreed that it is actually a topic that is coming up repeatedly on the doorsteps, that we definitively say where we stand, and I'm happy to say that this morning.
Can I just briefly come in there, because I think one of the things we need to focus on is to make sure that every woman who's in a difficult situation has all of the supports she needs or feels are necessary to be able to bring the child to term, no matter if the child has a fatal illness or has an abnormality, etc. And one of the problems there is that over the last 6 to 10 years we've seen massive cuts with regards child benefits and different supports that women generally should have in order for them to be able to make that choice. Even issues of housing. Housing is one of the key issues of this campaign. Yet in my own county there's 4,500 people on the housing waiting list. There are many mothers with young children.
And we've put 28 million into addressing the housing issue. If we're going to talk about housing, let's look at the record pattern. Let's look at what's being achieved over the next 5 years.
28 houses, Dominic. 28 houses have been built last year.
28 million is going into the housing service.
I don't want to give people a headache at home, so don't talk over me, please.
No, excuse me, but you must be aware that the council has just been given permission to buy a further 20 houses in the next 3 months. That's hot off the press. By the way, you may not be aware of that.
4,500 on the waiting list.
Okay, here we go.
We've got 500 houses coming down the line in the next few years.
Can we just reduce the housing? 28 houses were built by this government in the last year.
Just make the announcement if you want to. If you want to, I'm sure people will be interested in the 20 houses.
Yeah, the council has received permission from the local authority to purchase 20 houses in the next 3 months.
Well, that's big news for the 4,500 people on the housing waiting list.
We're right, and the mess you left us with. We can now start to spend money again because we've recovered from the mess you left us with.
I have to interrupt because we are out of time. I want to give a final word just to give some extra minutes to John Malone.
Thanks very much, Michael. Much appreciated. Vis-a-vis the housing, one thing I haven't heard described about housing is that we do have people from other countries, up to 500,000. So the country appears to have housed quite a few of those. So how it can solve the housing problem for the people coming in from other countries and Irish people is the $1,000 question, because I don't see how they're going to do it. But however, the other thing is, Michael, I want to say that I'm very grateful for the opportunity with LMFM to sort of try and get a point across. I'm probably the oldest candidate in this constituency, and not alone that, probably in the country. So I'll hope the pensioners out there will give me their number one vote.
Okay. Do you mind me asking you how old you are?
No, I've a lot of experience in the trade, in the supermarket trade.
You sound like a politician now, John. Listen, thank you very much to each of the candidates for coming into us today for our pre-election roundtable debate. We were joined by sitting TD in Meath West, Peadar Tóibin of Sinn Féin, Fianna Fáil councillor in Meath West, Shane Cassells, Dominic Hannigan, who's a sitting TD for the Labour Party in Meath East, and John Malone is an independent candidate in Meath West.
LMFM.
All right, Maria is back with more of the calls and text messages, and God, there seems to have been an awful lot since you were last here, Maria.
Lots of reaction coming in. A listener, and I'll just start off with what I have at the top. Responding to your interview with Martin McGuinness, Tony from Loud said, Michael, once again, Mr McGuinness and others in Europe are taking the view that the public can't be trusted to be asked the question on Europe. That in itself is a very worrying position on democracy. They would be happier for citizens to be kept within the EU against their will.
Well, there's an odd conversation going on. I mean, that's a valid point, I think, to a large degree, and I think you could say there's a valid argument for being concerned about holding a vote and what the outcome of that vote might be, because it could have disastrous consequences, as a lot of people are putting it. But there's a very interesting conversation going on at the moment about David Cameron striking a deal with European leaders because it doesn't matter what deal he strikes with them, he still has to go back and sell it to the people. Now, he may feel that he can do that, no bother, if he gets these terms and conditions met. But people in England...
No, it may not make any difference.
Yeah, in Northern Ireland, God knows, they might just say, no, we don't want it anymore. God knows, it's up to the people. That's what a referendum is.
And in a lot of people's views, I know it's not Tony's, will have serious implications for us on this island. Another Martin from County Meath. Michael, would the politicians, if they are re-elected, put all the promises that they are making now up on 20 by 10 billboards around the country, says this listener, and then take them down when all the promises are fulfilled? I wouldn't like to be the person given the job of taking them down on a commission basis only.
Who sent in that text? Tony, was it?
Martin.
Oh, Martin, sorry.
From County Meath.
Martin is stupid, isn't he? Martin, you're an idiot. What are you on about? Like, with that, do you know how much it costs to put up billboards? They'd be up there forever.
Yes, well, that's what he fears. I know.
I'm just making his point for him. Yeah.
Yes, so that's his thoughts on it. So thanks for that, Martin. Charlie, I mentioned a comment from him earlier, and he just asked me to mention, Michael, that a lot of people from this area are heading for that march tomorrow, the Right to Change water.
Oh yes, that's
march.
Okay, we'll
in Dublin at 2 p.m.
See what kind of a turnout that gets after.
Yes.
I read in one of the papers today a prediction of 100,000 people, but God knows.
Oh God, that'd be a big number now, wouldn't it? Paddy was also in touch from East Meath, urging all those opposed to water charges to get out there and march. He said that he has been marching throughout the last 2 years or year and a half, and that he will be taken to the streets again because he still feels strongly about it.
Okay.
Another, just on the whole discussion there about the abortion issue, Michael from Enniskeen in County Meath said, I just want to make a point. You 4 men debating the 8th Amendment. I'm a man, 60 years of age, with grey hair, the same as most of our politicians. I don't think it's right, or that we should have the right to tell a woman what to do with her body. He says, I wouldn't know what it's like to be raped by someone and become pregnant by them. Also to carry a baby with a fatal abnormality. I think it should be left to the women. He said, I know daddies should have a say, but at the same time, he says, if I wanted to get a vasectomy, it's a decision I could make myself with my own body.
I don't know. I might help him make up his mind.
He said, no one tells me what to do.
You'd probably have a view on it, Marie, would you?
Of what? Now here, what road are you going down now? Well, it's every man's choice, Michael, just the same as every woman's choice, isn't that it?
Well, not under the circumstances that John is talking about there, as things stand, and that would require an amendment to the Constitution and to repeal the 8th Amendment as it stands, and that is the point that he's making, and that is the issue that I suppose a lot of people are asking questions about, as we heard from the candidates.
Yes, absolutely. Another listener, Yvonne, was in touch and said, Michael, are people aware what it means if they vote for a politician whose aim is to legalise the deliberate killing of an unborn child because they have a short life expectancy or a physical or mental disability? How can they trust these politicians to care for people with the same problems who were lucky enough to have been born? Beware what kind of people you give power to. Someday we will all be old, sick and perhaps disabled. Will our right to life be legislated away too?
Okay, and that goes back to the point that you were making, that some people would argue that there should be a right to choice, and that women should have the choice as to whether to go through a pregnancy under very difficult circumstances, or to give life to a baby that is not compatible with life, as the expression goes, which I think is offensive to some people as well. We have to leave it there for the moment, though, Marie, because our time has run out. And as once again, remember, there'll be a podcast available on our website, LMFM.ie, this afternoon if you'd like to listen back to today's programme. Our thanks to Marie Kearns for producing the programme today and this week, Maggie McGuire for researching, Chris Murray in the control tower. I'm Michael, God willing. We'll see you for our next programme on Monday morning. That'll be at 9 a.m. right here on LMFM. Good morning. Bye-bye.
Michael Reid on LMFM is heard live from 9 a.m. weekdays, and this is a repeat broadcast of the programme. But you can make comment right now on our 24-hour comment line. Call us now or anytime on 1850 365 958. That's 1850 365 958. And the lines are open now. Michael Reid on LMFM.